Welcome to another episode of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. In each episode, we both watch the same movie on our own and then record a conversation together later about what we liked, what we hated, if we were scared, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. The theme of this season is Back to Business. The past couple of seasons have involved deep dives on horror history, and this time around we're taking it easy with all of that, and instead focusing on talking about what is most interesting to us in each of the movies that we watch. So kick back, relax, and enjoy it with us. I've been considering something.
Are you going off the rails again? Wait, are you taking the reins?
What I'm thinking about doing...
You're a line stepper. You're crossing step.
Habitual line stepper.
There we go.
We might as well just make this a season about only watching movies that are available on AMC Plus, because it would appear that my wife will never cancel that thing that she added to watch like one season of something a long time ago. And so I keep looking these movies up thinking I'm going to have to rent them. And then it's like, oh no, free to you because you're paying $10 a month for it. I'm like, damn it, not again.
Well, but it also works out for me because I got the Shudder one, and everyone that you watch on AMC so far, I've watched on Shudder, so I haven't had to pay either. So, well, monthly, but
yeah, exactly. They're getting it one way or another. But that would mean if we're like doubling down on that, we're getting better value for our money out of these things that we're subscribed to.
That's true.
Yeah, just a little something to throw out there. But as you mentioned, this one was a Shudder exclusive. Turns out. So kind of like we talked about last season, the current thing that is kind of going on with horror movies, like how they get like more independent horror movies, how they get picked up and made available, is it's not just pitching to the big Hollywood production companies. Now it's like pitching to the streaming services. And I feel like Shudder is kind of like, it's got to be like the holy grail for a horror movie, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, as far as streaming goes, yeah, without a doubt. Yeah.
Because, I mean, like you could get on Netflix, but not everybody subscribed to Netflix is like itching for new horror movies. Whereas I feel like everybody who with a Shudder subscription is going to be very like open to what they might advertise to you. Yeah. And so it just seemed like, you know, a great way to get people watching your movie. So. I feel
like Shudder would be the one like streaming service that if they decided to they could broaden their genres and have actions or whatever, that the viewers might actually be pissed because it is just, right. You know,
I go to it for one thing.
Yeah. Which is just dope as hell, man.
Yeah. So I knew very, very little about this movie other than that I've seen people talking about it on the horror subreddit. And it's called The Dark and the Wicked, and it's from 2020. And I found out that it was directed by Brian Bertino, who also directed The Strangers and The Strangers Prey at Night.
Yeah, I found that out after I watched this too, man.
So that was one reason I was like super interested in seeing it, because from just the very brief description I read, it sounded like a very different type of movie. And after watching it, I feel like it was. I mean, this one reminded me a lot more of like The Witch than it did The Strangers. And I get that there's kind of some overlap as far as that feeling of like suspense or dread. But this one definitely was like playing in a very different universe, I think, than the Strangers movies.
Yeah, I was going to say the only similarity just from like a non-professional eye would be the sense of dread. And I feel like the sense of dread in The Strangers might make a little bit more sense to me in the first one, just The Strangers, now than it did when I originally watched it. But.
Is goat horror a genre?
I feel like if there's a goat, there's going to be a witch, though.
Right.
Because I was wondering.
It's kind of the thing. Yeah. Like they kind of seem to go hand in hand as like goats and the devil.
That should be couples costumes for us.
Oh, yeah. You want to be the goat or the devil?
I want to be the dark.
Okay.
No, I want to be the wicked. You be the dark.
Okay.
All right.
Black Peter. Yeah. So this movie was definitely like a different horror subgenre entirely than The Strangers.
Mm-hmm.
This one was definitely like supernatural, almost like haunted house type.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really the house that was haunted, but the haunting was in the house. And then it had to answer that same question that haunted house movies have to answer, which is, why don't the people just leave? And it's because the dad was old and sick and couldn't travel or whatever, and the kids wanted to stay there with him. So that was all kind of like an interesting twist on what I think is a pretty well-established subgenre. And then the thing that I think was... like the one negative I've got for this one, because I want to get it out of the way early. Well, I've got two, but the immediate one. In this subgenre, I think the pacing is really hard to get right. And it was, to me, it felt like this one just kind of like died off in between the scary parts a few times.
Yeah.
Because I didn't find the acting to be like super compelling. It was just kind of that deadpan, almost like independent film.
Mm-hmm.
I don't got no feelings type acting.
Love you.
So? Yeah. Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly that. And so it did slow down a little bit, but it also did a good job of just kind of like the setting and the imagery. And like, as soon as I saw those mannequins in the opening scene, I knew we were in for a ride.
Yeah. Yeah.
So did you know anything at all about this one going into it?
No, so I didn't either. I think that I actually knew zero about it. None. Zilch. Nothing. I felt terrible about it. Not really. I wasn't on the horror subreddits. I think that... I don't know if that helped or not, because I kind of been going into it that way, because I feel like doing too much research before I just get bored while watching. And I feel like it's definitely helped a little bit. But you talk about, I agree that there were like, okay, let me get the bad out too. I agree with you on their delays, between the horror scenes. I think one thing that they did that kind of helped out, and maybe if they could have figured out a way to like elevate that a little bit more, was just the days that it would all of a sudden stop and it would be Sunday. All of a sudden stop, whatever. I felt like that kind of helped reset it a little bit, or at least in my mind it did, because it was like, okay, well, this is a new day. Now I don't know what's happening between, now and when the horror comes. I don't know if it could be 30 seconds or if it could be, 30 minutes from now. So there was that. I felt like I wish that something could have helped it out. Also, the indie acting comment, I definitely understand, like, because I just bought the Royal Tenenbaums for $5.
Oh.
That's the only reason why I wanted to bring that comment up.
Yeah,
pretty stoked about that. But no, I knew nothing, and I gotta say, I like this movie.
I did
a
too.
lot. I thought it was good. I thought that there were definitely things that I think they did better than, maybe a bigger studio or whatever. But I definitely think there were things that it definitely hurt them on. I also had the thought while watching this, I wrote it down. I just want to say this real quick, but I feel like haunted houses, we should start calling those haunted homes. Haunted houses, that's not a home. You know what I'm saying?
I'm with you.
Thank you.
Because this was, in fact, a haunted home.
This was, So...
a haunted farm home, in fact.
Yeah, that's just what it is. But I think that not going into it helped, because it was hard to kind of know necessarily what was going on, like with the like supernatural piece of it. And so that could either hurt or help you in the sense of, if I don't know and I'm already bored. But they had enough that kept me. They had enough creepy that kept me going. So I think not knowing anything, it being a little confusing didn't necessarily hurt, because there was enough spice of horror tossed in that kind of kept me going. I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed this.
So you talked about this one doing some things better than the bigger Hollywood movies.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like this one had such a good command of what it was and what it was trying to be. And towards the beginning, there's that scene where like something happens in the barn that freaks out the goats, and you don't even know what, but those, I guess they were supposed to be like alarms or whatever, the kind of homemade things that were like hanging from the fencing that would make noise if something passed by them, start going and shaking and being loud. And just like with the music and the sound and the way the camera was cutting around, it was super intense, and it just gave you that kind of like sit on the edge of your seat feeling of anxiety. And for it to do that without anything actually happening, like you didn't see anything scary, like nothing was really going on. It wasn't some big like payoff or buildup or anything. It was just a really, really creepy scene. And I'm like, okay, well, like from a movie making perspective, they can pull off anything they want to do. So where are we going from here? And that really kind of pulled me in from the beginning. And so then it just escalated from there. And so then when you get to that scene where like the mom is chopping and then ends up chopping her fingers off, and it's just so up close and brutal and awful. And then the next day they find her like hanging in the barn. It's just like, there's not really any limit on where this is about to go. So buckle up, because it's not going to get better.
Yeah.
Like from a, you're not going to start feeling better. Like this movie is just going to be brutal and intense and not let up.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. I actually think that with the, maybe with the intensity of the beginning, it may have made the middle or the in-between horror
I
feel a little bit slower too. The thing too with when she was doing her, like when she was cutting her fingers off, she was just in it. Like it stayed in that, and that was like a piece throughout this. I felt like when it did something like gnarly, like cutting your fingers off, like it made you continue. Like she continued chopping her fingers off, and then started chopping the chop thing, and so it definitely puts you in the pocket. But with the starting off with the early warning system with the bottles, I think one of the reasons, because I was startled, I didn't jump or anything, but it was just like it was uneasy, and I think the reason was because it was almost like when you're like in your back in someone else's backyard at night or whatever, you're at your friend's house, don't necessarily know the yard, and you have light on behind, one direction, but the noise comes from the darkness, and it's almost even darker because the light's behind you. And it kind of felt like that scenario, or like when you're camping, you're by the fire, you can see maybe 5 feet out, you can't see like 15 feet out. And so, man, I don't know what it was, some black magic that they added to it, but I was definitely uneasy, and that like started it. That was almost like the alarm bell for like, all right, start the anxiety.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it did a good job of changing up the intensity as things went on, because through the first several scenes, you could have totally just believed that the mom was crazy. And then when the daughter has like the scene in the shower where she hears the footsteps and then like sees the dad looking all possessed or whatever, and then all of a sudden he's not there anymore, and the brother comes in, and like you see from someone else's perspective that there's nobody there, and you're like, oh, she's just losing it too. But then there's the scene where the son wakes up in the middle of the night and he sees the mom like floating outside in the darkness, which in and of itself, creepy AF. But then he hears her singing from like inside the house, and he's walking inside, and you see her kind of pop up right behind him. And you see her, but he doesn't. And so that's the first time that you realize that you as a viewer are seeing things that are happening that is danger to the characters that isn't just in their head, right? Like that's the point where it's like the danger is real. There's no easy way out. This is happening. So just get ready, because it's just going to keep getting worse. And it did.
Right. Yeah. And it's also it's also confusing, not in a bad way. I'm not questioning it. I don't think I necessarily question it too much, but it was like, how is he seeing her with the demon being out of him? or whatever it was. I don't know. It was interesting. 'Cause you're talking about when they walked by and saw that there was a mannequin in the doorway, and when they looked out the window, and then when they came back, the mom was replaced the mannequin, right?
No, I'm talking more specifically about like he looked out and he saw her just like floating.
Oh, okay.
Like in the front yard.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And then when he's back in, he's going to like look through the door or something, and you see her kind of like float up behind him.
Okay, that's my bad. That's why I said they, because I was like, I thought that was the girl that happened to.
Oh, I see.
And so it was my bad. Yeah, it was intense, man. That was the other thing, though. It did have, even though that wasn't necessarily as jumpy, the bottles were for sure, but it had some well placed, like insidious table scene drops to it that I respect.
Yeah, and it didn't really seem like afraid of its special effects, or like it didn't try to do anything that it couldn't really pull off. And so it definitely had a number of scenes that went far enough with the special effects to be very convincing, but I didn't really see any where I was just like, oh, this takes me out of the moment, because it was trying to do something that it couldn't.
Yeah, so I agree to an extent. I thought like one of the people at the beginning, they had their eyes, gosh, I don't remember
like
which
the
one.
whited out eyes.
Yeah, but this one was like a purple white out. Like it looked like makeup. It looked kind of fake.
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
so much so, now that I'm thinking back on it, like, did they do that on purpose to make it seem different? But yeah, I mean, and the good thing too was that there wasn't a ton that they had to do. There wasn't a ton that they had to do with special effects. I don't feel like, was there?
Not like anything that was like levitation. Close up. Like, yeah, it was more kind of further away. And,
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, but it was just it was a very intense movie all around. It was a very heavy and dark movie, and wicked, I guess.
Did they ever say how the mom got this thingy, or how this like started?
No.
Okay.
So
I don't feel bad for not knowing then.
Yeah, I have like, before we get into our questions, I have one thing that I feel like is an example of this movie at its finest, and one thing that's kind of an example of the movie at its least fine. Mm-hmm. The finest was the whole scene with the brother at the end. Oh. Like, he eventually realizes, like, yeah, there's no getting out of this. Like, things aren't going to get better here. I'm leaving. Yeah. I'm going to go be with my wife and kids, because that's where I need to be. Mm-hmm. And he drives all night and goes home, and then I almost don't even want to spoil it in case somebody's going to go watch it. Like, just the experience of going through that scene. But that was like A+ psychological horror. And it also exercised what is probably like my biggest fear, or like the thing that messes with me the most, where it's like you can't trust what you're seeing or experiencing, and you're like reacting to it, but then you find out that it wasn't even real. Like that scene stuck with me for a long time afterwards, and still kind of bugs me if I think about it too much. Yeah. And that was just like a super effective thing that was almost like just a tag on. Like, they could have just let him leave, you know what I mean? And done like everything else that the movie was going to do. Right. But just like, it really just wouldn't let anybody have a happy ending, you know?
Yeah. If you watch this and think that this was a happy ending, goodness, this is, I guess we don't have to say what happened, but holy cow, I didn't even see it coming.
No, same. It took me totally by surprise. Yeah.
I thought that it wanted to hurt him, so that's what it did. And then you think like just the trauma that's involved with them afterward, and it's like, oh my gosh, like he literally took that pocket knife that you knew wasn't too sharp, because none of those pocket knives are.
Yep. Oh. Yeah. And that I feel like was this movie being the absolute best at what it wanted to do. And that's just like mess with you on a deeply psychological level. Where it was more at its worst, though, was I feel like there were some parts of it that just didn't come together from a story perspective. And that scene where she calls the priest the day after they saw him, And then
when he was
it
like,
turns out he's like never been there or something, but he's like, but you're messing with me because the name that you said is my daughter's name or something. Like, I had to rewind that scene a couple of times, and I still don't understand what it was going for. Like, it just, whatever that twist was supposed to be didn't land for me and made me more confused than scared. And I feel like that's the thing that you kind of run the risk of with more like psychological horror, is if it doesn't just immediately land and you have to take yourself out of the moment of the movie to try and figure out what's going on, then that just totally like ruins the impact. Yeah,
I definitely agree with that. I watched this film twice, and both times it just didn't necessarily make sense. My thought, or my theory with it, or not my theory, but my thought with it was like, I felt like I was watching a sequel to something. But I don't, what did I miss out on? Because it was like, who's his daughter? Just trying to figure that out and figure out why the neighbor killed himself. Like, it was just there were just a few things that didn't necessarily make sense, but I don't know if it had to keep going, to make the story work, the movie work. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was also one that stood out to me, was the way that the neighbor was being tormented just seemed like completely out of context and weird. So I didn't have a good explanation for that. But anyway, overall though, I mean, the impact of the movie, like thinking back on it, this one is pretty high up there for me for like psychological horror.
Yeah.
I would definitely put it on a list of like actually disturbing movies that I've seen recently.
Yeah.
But did you have anything else before we get into the questions?
I don't. Nope.
Okay. So my first question for you is a little bit long-winded. I'm sure you're surprised. Back when we were in like middle school and at the church, we were very much like in that church world. And at the Christian bookstores where they sold CDs that our parents would allow us to have, because our interest was always music. Like, it didn't matter what or where. That's what we were into. They would have like stickers on the Christian CDs that would say "for fans of." And so it would be for fans of like bands that your friends liked. And it's like, well, if they're into that, you could get this. And then maybe if they heard it in your car, they'd think you were cool too. So like they would sell like a Slick Shoes album and it would say like "for fans of Blink-182." And you're like, yeah, dude, same people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which that's probably not the best example, because Slick Shoes actually has some bangers, but so who would be on the FFO sticker, the "for fans of" sticker for this movie?
It would be The Witch and Hereditary. That was Hereditary.
Whoa. It's like you were looking at my notes. I had exactly the same thing.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to explain. The Witch, obviously everyone thought the atmosphere for that one was pretty intense. I didn't necessarily get it because I couldn't understand them. I got that with Hereditary.
Yeah.
Talking about uncomfortable. Just the whole time I did not feel comfortable watching that film. Just anxiety, whatever the case is, getting stressed. The same with this one. Like this one, man, it was just layers.
That freaking telephone pole scene in Hereditary, and then that freaking finger scene in this one. You know what I mean? Those are two things that will just like never be scrubbed from my mind.
Yeah, it's almost, you're right. It's almost like a style. And then, you have the, the poking out the eyes and just, you definitely felt like you were at times just watching something that you're just like, I don't know why should I, like, what?
There's no coming back from this.
Yeah. It's like, but, I would say that The Witch or Hereditary. Yeah. And Hereditary.
Nice.
What I wanted to ask this one, I like asking this question, so I ask it a lot, but what's the right setting for this? And the reason why I ask is because I felt very intense watching it. I don't know if this is a good buddy film.
I don't think so. Yeah. I kind of feel like this is at home alone, like this is a movie that requires your full attention.
Oh yeah.
And I would say that it's a movie you got to watch at night, but I watched it in the middle of the afternoon and it still shook me.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
like it's just, I think it's a movie that is, you're not going to have fun watching this one. That's not what you go to this movie for. You got to give it your attention and you got to be ready to meet it on its own terms.
Yeah. So like if you are a listener and you hadn't watched this film and you're known as the happy chipper person at work, or like people think you're always in a good mood and you love life, just watch this film. You'll be like the rest of us.
Yeah.
Okay. Weirdo. Why are you so awake at 6 a.m?
Yeah. It's like that guy who's always super happy in the office first thing in the morning. Watch this movie, then come talk to me tomorrow.
You're right. And then you'll feel just like how I feel right now, that no listener will understand what I'm talking about. I'm sorry. That was a perfect transition.
We got to tear off that attitude, these cheerful people.
You're damn right.
Yeah. So so we've talked a lot about like the good scenes in this movie because there were a lot of them, but what was your least favorite scene?
Dude, I read that as which out of those two were the best, so that's why I wasn't talking about either of those scenes much during the episode. That's my bad.
Yeah, I just had those in there like as reminders in case you just drew like a total blank. I'm like, those were two pretty rough ones to watch, but I didn't know what your actual answer would be.
Yeah, so I would say like the worst one is the one that we actually did talk about, the dad going home to his wife and kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I feel like that's I feel like anyone can relate to that. Like you're wanting the thing that you love the most and or wanting to be with them because it's not going to be that great, or you want to maybe protect them, and then whatever happens. But I will say, like, so let me answer this from the point of like crochet needles in the eyes versus cut off fingers. I thought when she was cutting the fingers and she kept going, and like what I mean is like she cut the knuckles, and then started kind of cutting at an angle like you would chop up food. That was crazy. But the crochet needles will win hands down every time, or anything that has to do with the eyes will win hands down every time, because that's something that just makes you hurt. I don't want that to happen to me ever.
I don't like to think about it.
No. Yeah. Oh. Anyway, let me transition to my side. Did I only put 2 questions on there?
Well, so I interpreted it as what was the worst thing about the movie, and then a follow-up question about the atmosphere being scary and if it was effective, like the way it was presented for what it was trying to do.
Oh, yeah. No, you did that right. But you asked that. That's why I was chopped up. Sorry, I'm just going to ask you another one.
Oh, no, that's fine, because I said least favorite scene. You can say what was the worst thing, because I got a good answer for that one.
Oh, what was the worst thing about this film, not scene related?
So it is the same problem I have with pretty much any possession movie, where I'm like, if you had to stop and take a step back and summarize what the devil's goals were, or why he would spend his time this way, it just seems like a real inefficient way to get human souls.
Yeah.
Just like this long, drawn out, going after one human. Like, you didn't get any backstory to set it up. You didn't get any, like, this is when the devil first got a foothold or anything. Like, they could have given you just a little bit of narrative around it. They wouldn't have to go super in depth or anything, but just some kind of thing that you could kind of tie back to that if they had used time on that and not the confusing priest scene, for example, it would have made the movie feel way more cohesive.
Yeah, because there was almost like a weird feeling between the siblings of like, did they have a good relationship with their parents? Did they have a bad one? Did, that kind of thing. But then you also had, I feel like this was just like an actual horror movie version of a ghost story of sorts. Didn't necessarily know
when it came to like the interpersonal interactions. Mm-hmm. I can see that for sure.
Yeah. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah. So what was more scary to you, this or The Strangers?
The Strangers, because it can actually happen. This one, okay. I don't really feel like it can actually happen. However, which one would I prefer to be in? The Strangers situation, 150 fucking percent. Are you kidding me? I just don't think that, that hauntings and things are real. So it's just, I don't.
Yeah. You can like disconnect a little bit.
If it is real, are you kidding me? I don't want to be part of anything like that. I would way rather be able to at least try to shoot my way out of or swing my way out of a situation any day. But I thought, I thought, oh, it's more scary. This was more scary. Okay. No, in real life, Strangers, never mind. They're both two fantastic films. Like you said, they're not necessarily two different genres, but this one, the dread in this one that I felt, I didn't have dread watching it. I just felt dread watching it, if you guys know what I'm saying.
So counterpoint, I would be terrified I would not enjoy being trapped in a home with any of these people.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind being trapped in a house with Liv Tyler in the early 2000s.
That's true, but here's where I thought you were going with that. What if the Strangers went to the wrong house? They ended up in this house. Who would win that one? Pillowface? No way, man.
Nah.
What if this is where they came from?
What if they are dead?
Whoa.
And haunting this house instead of the devil?
What if this is the brother and sister and mother?
Oh my God!
Holy cow! Okay.
Yeah.
This podcast
starts writing some fan fiction.
Yep.
You got one more?
Yeah, I got one more.
Okay.
I've talked a lot about the atmosphere of this film being scary and effective. Did you feel like it was? And if so, what added to that? Meaning, was it because there were some sounds being played like in the background that was a little unnerving at times? Dread
about
and
that.
Sorry.
The sound. There was one part in the movie where I was getting kind of mad because I was just like, it sounded like all of a sudden it had a little bit of like almost like techno electronica kind of bass in the background, like bass and kick. And then there was like one scene where I heard it and I was like, okay, that's an interesting choice, whatever. But then it came back later at a time when I was like, that doesn't match at all. Like that's distracting from what's going on here. And I don't understand why a movie that was made this well so far is like screwing up something easy like background sounds for a scene. And then I paused the movie and I realized it was just some asshole had parked his car down the street and was bumping music really loud.
I was going to ask you if it was the church across the street, but I said, honestly I was, because I was like, I didn't hear that.
So I was sitting there getting mad about it, and then I stopped and I was like, no, wait a minute, this can't be right. And so I paused it, and then when it kept going, I was so relieved. But
it made you like it even more.
Yes, that they chose not to do that.
Yeah.
But overall, I thought everything about how it was made was really good, other than I didn't, particularly enjoy the acting. I think it would have been more compelling with a little bit more chemistry between the brother and sister. But it all had kind of that dark, heavy feeling to it. And like I said, from
visually was dark.
Yes.
The feeling of mood, mom being hanged.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing, it was just like this like feedback loop of reinforcing what it was trying to be. And I think we talk about that a lot with horror movies, where the way that a movie is made can either really, really help or really, really undermine what it's trying to accomplish. And I feel like this one was just in its bag the whole time, being exactly what it was trying to be. And so from the movie making perspective and the way that they handled sound and visuals and even just like kind of the editing and the camera angles and everything else was just really, really well done for being exactly what it was trying to be. And they really produced a creepy, just kind of soul-crushing movie, which with as many horror movies as we've watched, for us to both feel that way is kind of saying something. So well done to Brian Bertino.
This movie definitely had all meaning under it too. It had to have. I had an epiphany. You're hurting yourself helping people too much. Is that it? No, because in the thing he wanted the most, it ended up hurting him. I don't know. Who knows? I don't care to know. This movie's good. I recommend it. You should watch it right now if you have AMC Plus. Only if your wife is still streaming it unknowingly.
Or if you got Shudder.
Or if you have Shudder that you're aware of, that you're hiding from your wife.
Yeah. If your bank account is getting tariffed every month to pay for AMC Plus, this is your movie.
It is. And we just like to thank all you queens for staying here and sticking us out. See you later.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com or hit us up on the IG. That's what the kids call Instagram. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I swear to God, Daniel, that's not how tariffs fucking work. You know that.
Look, I'm just saying give it a shot, you know?
I'm fixing to tariff this podcast.
Everybody's like, look, here's how math works. And I'm like, you don't understand how American I am.
Got him.